There's a worn recipe box sitting in my kitchen drawer, its wooden corners softened by decades of use. Inside, tucked between handwritten recipes for victory cake and mock apple pie, my grandmother penciled a note that still makes me pause. Make it last. Make it count. Waste nothing. She lived through the Depression and raised 6 kids on a teacher's salary during the 1940s. Every meal was a magic trick. Every leftover, a new beginning. The butter stretcher that doubled your dollar. Picture this. 1943, butter costs 30 cents a pound plus 7 ration points, and you've got a family of 8 staring at one precious stick. My grandmother learned this trick from her neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, who swore it saved her marriage when money got tight. You'd dissolve one envelope of unflavored gelatin in cold water, warm it gently, then whip it with a pound of softened butter and evaporated milk. Suddenly that single pound became 2 pounds of creamy spread that lasted a month in the icebox. The genius part? This spread looked and tasted like whipped butter, perfect for morning toast, when the kids lined up with empty plates. You couldn't fry with it, mind you, this was table butter only, but when every penny mattered, doubling your butter meant you could afford shoes for Johnny come September. Newspaper, magic, beyond reading. Those old newspapers stacked by the kitchen door weren't just for catching up on Roosevelt's latest policies. Rather than buying roll after roll of paper towels, 1940s homemakers used newspapers to clean windows, resulting in shiny, streak-free glass. My Aunt Dorothy swore by the technique, claiming the newsprint's texture grabbed dirt better than any modern cloth. But here's where it gets clever. Newspapers became drawer liners, wrapping paper, and even temporary refrigerator shelf covers. The trick was knowing which pages to use. The society pages with less ink worked best for delicate tasks. Just wait until you hear how they used newspaper for keeping root vegetables fresh all winter. That's coming up at number 47. The bacon grease jar that flavored everything. Bacon grease was the secret weapon of the 1950s kitchen, and every grandmother worth her salt had a special jar by the stove. After Sunday breakfast, that liquid gold got strained through cheesecloth into a clean mason jar. My grandmother's jar had gold written on it in her careful script. She wasn't joking. 1 tablespoon could transform plain green beans into something the kids actually wanted to eat. Use leftover bacon grease for frying eggs, sautéing greens, or adding a depth of flavor to gravies. During the war, when butter was precious, that bacon jar became the household's cooking fat. Some families even traded jars of clean bacon grease like currency. Mrs. Peterson down the street would give you 3 eggs for a half cup of good, clean, dripping aluminum foil, the original recycling program. Sheets of aluminum foil are wiped with a dish rag and neatly folded back in the box for next time. This wasn't being cheap, this was being smart. During the war, civilians gathered aluminum foil right down to the shiny stuff wrapped around chewing gum so that it could be repurposed for the war effort. My mother still carefully washes and folds every piece of foil, a habit from watching her mother do the same. Clean foil got used 3, 4, sometimes 5 times before finally being crumpled up to scrub pots. Another use that saved money on steel wool. The best part? That final ball of used foil made the perfect toy for the cat. Nothing went to waste, not even entertainment. Perfect hard-boiled eggs every time. You know that frustration when half your egg white sticks to the shell? Your grandmother never had that problem. The key? Add a teaspoon of baking soda to the boiling water. This simple step makes peeling easy, thanks to a change in pH levels that separates the shell from the egg whites. This trick saved precious protein during lean times when you couldn't afford to lose even a bite of egg. My grandmother kept a small tin marked EGGSODA right next to her stove. She'd drop eggs into already boiling water with that magic teaspoon, time them exactly, 3 minutes for soft, 10 for hard, then plunge them into cold water. Perfect eggs every single time. No waste, no frustration, Just smooth, beautiful eggs ready for egg salad sandwiches that stretched one egg into lunch for two. The icebox organization system. Before electric refrigerators became common, the icebox required military precision. The most practical arrangement was one where all operations moved from left to right, but it went deeper than that. Grandmother kept a chart inside the cabinet door showing exactly where everything belonged. Meat went in the coldest spot, directly under the ice block. Milk and cream lined the right side where cold air flowed down. Leftovers occupied the middle shelf in covered dishes, never uncovered as the ice would absorb odors. Vegetables stayed in the crisper drawer with a damp cloth to maintain humidity. This system meant nothing spoiled, nothing got lost, and the ice lasted 3 days instead of two. When you paid the iceman by the block, those extra days added up to real savings. Making milk last without refrigeration. Here's something that would make modern food safety experts faint. Keeping milk fresh for days without constant refrigeration. The secret was scalding. Fresh milk got heated just to the point where tiny bubbles formed around the edges, not boiling, just hot enough to kill surface bacteria. Then it went into sterilized bottles and down to the coolest spot in the house. My great-aunt lived on a farm where electricity didn't arrive until 1951. She'd lower her milk bottles into the well on hot days, keeping them at a constant 55 degrees. For city folks, milk bottles went into a pan of cold water in the coolest corner, with a wet towel draped over top. The evaporation kept things cool, and milk stayed sweet for nearly a week. It's physics, not magic, though it surely seemed magical when fresh milk was Tuesday's luxury, lasting through Sunday dinner. Flour paste, the everything glue. Specialized cleaning items can really add up in price. Grandma uses her pantry items instead. And nothing proved more versatile than simple flour paste. Mix flour with water until smooth, cook until thick, and you've got paste for everything from wallpaper to school projects. My mother remembers making paper chains for Christmas with flour paste, carefully gluing each strip of repurposed wrapping paper. That same paste fixed torn book pages, sealed envelopes when you ran out of stamps with glue, and even held fabric patches until they could be properly sewn. One batch cost maybe 2 cents and lasted weeks in a covered jar. Compare that to store-bought glue at 15 cents a bottle, when 15 cents bought a loaf of bread. Potato water, the secret ingredient. Never, ever pour potato water down the drain. This starchy liquid was liquid gold in Depression kitchens. Those humble dried beans were worth their weight in gold when meat became a luxury most couldn't afford. And potato water made them even better. Use warm potato water instead of plain water for bread. The starch feeds the yeast and creates a softer crumb. Cold potato water thickens gravies without lumps. My grandmother even used it to starch my grandfather's Sunday shirts. She'd save it in mason jars, using it throughout the week. Her gravy was legendary, and now you know why that potato starch created silk-smooth sauce from just drippings and flour. Some neighbors thought she had magical powers. Really, she just knew not to waste anything. Vinegar, the wonder cleaner. Long before fancy cleaning products, there was vinegar. See these smart ways to clean with salt and lemon, but vinegar was the true all-star. White vinegar cost pennies and cleaned everything from windows to coffee pots. My grandmother's vinegar bottle had a dozen uses written on a paper taped to it. Windows, 1 part to 3 water. Coffee pot, full strength monthly. Hair rinse, 1 tablespoon per quart. She'd soak fish in vinegar water to remove the smell, add it to pie crust for extra flakiness, and use it to set the dye when coloring fabric. The bathroom mirror never had spots, her coffee always tasted fresh, and her hair shined like a movie star's, all from a bottle that cost less than a nickel. Salt more than seasoning. Salt did double, triple, even quadruple duty in clever kitchens. Beyond seasoning, it preserved food, cleaned copper, removed stains, and even helped with laundry. My grandmother kept three kinds: table salt for cooking, kosher salt for preserving, and rock salt for the ice cream maker. Here's a trick she taught me. Sprinkle salt on a fresh egg spill, wait 5 minutes, and it sweeps up easily. Salt in the wash water kept colours from running. A paste of salt and vinegar brought tarnished copper back to life. She'd even throw a handful into the fireplace to clean the chimney. The chemical reaction helped break down soot. One box of salt replaced a dozen modern products, and it never went bad. Wax paper's hidden powers. Before plastic wrap existed, wax paper was the multitasker of the kitchen. Cut a piece of parchment paper to line a pan. Use your leftover scraps to grease pans, but wax paper went even further. My grandmother ironed wax paper onto fabric to make it water resistant, instant raincoats for paper dolls and schoolbook covers. She'd run a hot iron over wax paper on her kitchen table, creating a smooth, easy, clean surface for rolling dough. Wrapped around cheese, it prevented drying without trapping moisture like plastic doughs. She even used it to polish her iron. Run the hot iron over wax paper, and any starch buildup disappeared. One box lasted months and cost a dime. Crumb jar economics. Every kitchen had a crumb jar, usually a pretty one displayed on the counter. During World War II, when meat was rationed and had to be purchased with tokens, this recipe went a long way in feeding a family, and breadcrumbs stretched everything. Toast ends, cracker bits, even the last broken cookies went into that jar. My grandmother would spread stale bread pieces on a cookie sheet, dry them in a low oven, then crush them fine. These crumbs became meatloaf extender, casserole toppings, and coating for fried foods. During flush times, she'd add herbs and call it Italian coating. During lean times, plain crumbs still made 4 pork chops feed 6 people. That pretty jar represented security. As long as it held crumbs, dinner could be stretched. Sour milk saves. Modern folks pour sour milk down the drain. Depression-era cooks saw liquid gold. Slightly soured milk made the most tender pancakes, the fluffiest biscuits, and the moistest chocolate cake you ever tasted. My grandmother had a sour milk recipe card file. When milk started to turn, she'd move it to the counter to sour properly, not spoil, but develop that tangy flavor. The acid in sour milk reacts with baking soda, creating extra lift in baked goods. Her chocolate cake recipe specifically called for sour milk, claiming fresh milk made it heavy. She'd sometimes add a teaspoon of vinegar to fresh milk when she needed sour milk immediately. Waste not, want not, and eat better because of it. Apple peels, tea and medicine. When apples were prepared for eating or drying, the peels would be carefully removed in long spirals and hung to dry near stoves. But here's what the reference doesn't tell you, my grandmother's specific technique that neighbors begged to learn. She'd peel apples in one continuous spiral, then hang them from the curtain rod in the kitchen where rising heat from the stove dried them perfectly. She would steep them in hot water with a pinch of cinnamon if she had it, making a sweet tea that was our winter treat. But the real magic happened when someone got sick. She'd make a strong brew of apple peel tea with honey and a tiny pinch of salt. The pectins soothed upset stomachs better than any store-bought medicine, and it cost nothing but the time to save those peels. Celery leaves, the forgotten herb. Watch someone throw away celery leaves today, and you'd make a grandmother weep. Those leaves were carefully washed, tied in bundles, and hung to dry just like expensive herbs, because that's exactly what they were. Dried celery leaves went into the soup pot for depth of flavor. Ground fine, they became celery powder for seasoning. My grandmother kept a special jar labeled CLSE. Her combination of celery leaves and sea salt that went on everything from roast chicken to potato salad. Fresh leaves got chopped into tuna salad or soup. She'd say, "You buy the whole celery, You use the whole celery. One bunch provided vegetable sticks for lunch, seasoning for a week, and enough dried leaves to last a month. Mason jar mania. Many Americans canned fruits and vegetables during the World Wars, especially when rationing became the norm during World War II. But mason jars did so much more than just preserve food. My grandmother numbered her jars with a grease pencil, number 1 through number 50. She knew exactly what lived in each one. Flour in number 1 through 5, different beans in number 6 through 12, pickles and preserves in the rest. But here's the clever part. Those jars became measuring cups, marks scratched on the side, mixing bowls for small batches, and even drinking glasses for everyday use. She'd send lunch to my grandfather in a mason jar. Soup stayed hot for hours. Empty jars stored buttons, nails, and coins. Some women even used them as hair curlers. One good jar lasted decades and served a dozen purposes. The three-bowl system. Every efficient kitchen had 3 bowls by the sink: wash, rinse, and bits. This system saved water, soap, and time when every resource counted. The wash bowl held hot, soapy water, just a few drops of soap, mind you. The rinse bowl had clean, warm water, but the genius was the bits bowl. All plate scrapings, vegetable trimmings, and food bits went here. Good scraps became tomorrow's soup. Vegetable trimmings went to the chickens or compost. Even dishwater got saved. Cooled, soapy water watered the garden. Rinse water went to the flowers. My grandmother could wash dishes for 8 people with less water than we use to rinse a single plate today. Rendering fat like a pro. When you have to cook everything from scratch, you'll notice how little margarine you have to last you a week. That's why rendering fat became an art form. Any fat trimmed from meat went into the rendering pot, a heavy iron pot kept just for this purpose. Low heat melted the fat slowly, leaving crispy bits, cracklings, that became snacks or flavoring. The clear fat got strained through cheesecloth into jars labeled by sauce: beef, pork, or chicken. Each had different uses: beef for frying potatoes, pork for biscuits, chicken for delicate pastries. My grandmother's pie crust made with rendered leaf lard won the county fair 5 years running. Store-bought shortening can't compare, she'd say, and she was right. Dishwater soup stock. Oh, this sounds terrible until you understand the system. After washing dishes from a roast dinner, that warm water held dissolved fats, meat juices, and vegetable essence, the beginning of tomorrow's soup. The rinse water from the meat platter went into a special pot. Add the water from boiling vegetables, the last bits of gravy, even the water from soaking dried beans. By evening, you had a rich base for soup. My grandmother would strain it, add bones or vegetable scraps, and simmer overnight on the back of the stove. Morning revealed a pot of golden broth that cost nothing but saved fragments. Dishwater soup fed millions during the Depression, though nobody called it that at the table. The calendar menu. Leftovers are used strategically later in the week. But the real genius was the calendar system that made it work. My grandmother kept a wall calendar just for meals. Sundays, roast chicken was planned, knowing Monday would be chicken salad, Tuesday, chicken soup, Wednesday, chicken croquettes. She'd write it all down, planning backwards from each main protein. This prevented waste and stopped the dreaded "what's for dinner" panic. Shopping happened once a week with a list derived from that calendar. No impulse buys, no forgotten ingredients. She knew exactly how many meals each purchase would provide. That calendar was her kitchen Bible, and it stretched a teacher's salary to feed 6 kids. Emergency substitutions. Being flexible in the kitchen is a great way to save money. First of all, try to choose recipes with ingredients that you already stock. But grandmothers knew substitutions we've forgotten. No eggs, 1 tablespoon of flax seed in 3 tablespoons of water per egg. No butter, equal parts of saved bacon grease and flour. no vanilla, a drop of maple syrup, or a pinch of nutmeg. My grandmother kept a card file of substitutions learned from neighbours and relatives. Her famous wacky cake used no eggs or dairy, just vinegar and baking soda for leavening. Born of necessity during rationing, it became the requested birthday cake even in prosperous times. That card file was her insurance policy against empty shelves. The pie safe purpose. Before refrigeration, the pie safe wasn't just furniture, it was food security. Those decorative punched tin panels weren't just pretty, they let air circulate while keeping flies out. My great-grandmother's pie safe held more than pies. The bottom shelf stored root vegetables in baskets. The middle held that day's baked goods and leftovers that didn't need refrigeration. The top shelf was for items in use, the sourdough starter, rising bread, or cooling preserves. She knew exactly what could safely stay at room temperature and for how long. In summer, she'd drape the whole thing with wet burlap, evaporation, cooling that worked better than you'd think. That pie safe fed a family of 10 without a single refrigerator. Blanching and shocking. Families with access to fruit trees or berry patches would spend long summer days preparing fruit for drying, but vegetables needed different treatment, blanching and shocking. Drop vegetables in boiling water for exactly timed periods, 30 seconds for spinach, 2 minutes for green beans. Then immediately plunge into ice water. This stopped cooking, set the color, and prepared vegetables for drying or freezing. My grandmother could process a bushel of beans in an hour using this method. The blanched vegetables went onto screens for drying or into the new freezer when they finally got one in 1948. But here's the trick. Save that blanching water. Cooled, it became the most nutritious water for houseplants you could imagine. The stockpot philosophy. Bones, vegetable and fruit scraps, fish heads, and chicken feet found new purpose in rich, flavorful broth. The stockpot was never empty, never wasted. My grandmother's stockpot lived on the back burner, accepting contributions all week. Onion skins for color, celery leaves for flavor, chicken bones from dinner, carrot ends from lunch prep. Low heat, occasional water additions, and weekly straining produced liquid gold. That stock became soup, gravy, cooking liquid for rice, even a warming drink with salt and pepper when someone felt poorly. The week's cooking scraps transformed into the base for the next week's meals. It was perpetual motion cooking, when nothing ended and everything contributed. Windowsill gardens. Even in her 90s, she insisted on growing and drying her own herbs, but it started simpler, with windowsill gardens that anyone could manage. Green onions with roots still attached went into a glass of water. Within days, new growth appeared. Celery bottoms, carrot tops, even lettuce cores would sprout in water, then transfer to small pots. My grandmother's kitchen window looked like a miniature farm. These weren't full vegetables, you couldn't grow a whole carrot from a top, but the greens were nutritious and free. In February, when fresh vegetables cost dear, those windowsill greens went into soup, salads, and sandwiches. God provides, she'd say, but he expects you to tend the garden. Burnt match freshener. This sounds like folklore until you try it. Light a match, blow it out, and wave it around the kitchen. Cooking odors disappear like magic. My grandmother kept a special tin of wooden matches just for this purpose. After cooking fish or cabbage, she'd light one match, blow it out, and walk through the kitchen waving it like a wand. The sulfur in the match head neutralized odors better than any spray. She learned this from her mother, who learned it from her mother. 3 generations of women who never bought air freshener because they didn't need to. Sometimes the old ways really are the best ways. Candle wax preserver. Before plastic wrap or vacuum sealers, melted paraffin wax sealed everything from jam jars to cheese wheels. This wasn't just for canning, It was daily preservation. My grandmother bought paraffin blocks like groceries. Melted in a double boiler, it sealed open jam jars, preserved cheese, even waterproofed matches. She dipped the cut end of a cheese wheel in melted wax, creating an airtight seal that kept cheese fresh for weeks. String cheese, she'd dip the whole strand. Hard cheeses got wax shells that peeled off easily. Even leftover soup got a wax paper circle pressed onto its surface, then sealed with a ring of melted wax. 1 pound of paraffin cost a nickel and preserved hundreds of dollars of food. The root cellar science. Not everyone had a root cellar, but everyone used root cellar principles. Cool, dark, humid, these conditions preserved food for months without refrigeration. My grandmother turned a kitchen cupboard into a mini root cellar. Potatoes in a bin with apple slices, the ethylene gas prevents sprouting. Carrots layered in barely damp sand. Onions in mesh bags or old stockings hanging from hooks. She'd wrap green tomatoes individually in newspaper, storing them in boxes to ripen slowly all winter. The cupboard door had ventilation holes covered with screen. A pan of water on the bottom maintained humidity. From October to March, that cupboard provided fresh vegetables when the garden lay dormant. Clarifying used cooking oil. Cooking smarter, not harder, was the unspoken rule of the time. This included recycling cooking oil until it truly couldn't be used anymore. After frying, my grandmother would let oil cool slightly, then add a few tablespoons of cornstarch. The cornstarch absorbed food particles and odors. Strain through cheesecloth, and that oil was good for several more uses. She kept separate jars for fish oil, chicken oil, and vegetable-only oil. Each had its purpose: fish oil for Friday fish fries, clean oil for donuts. She'd add a piece of raw potato while heating used oil. It absorbed any off flavors. Oil was expensive and rationed during the war. This system meant one bottle lasted a month instead of a week. The egg preservation method. When eggs were used in cooking, the shells would be rinsed clean, crushed, and thoroughly dried. But preserving whole eggs was the real magic. Fresh eggs, unwashed with the blooms still on, went into a crock of water glass, sodium silicate solution. Sounds strange, but eggs preserved this way stayed fresh for up to 9 months. My grandmother kept her egg crock in the basement, layering eggs as the hens laid them. Come winter, when hens stopped laying, she still had eggs for baking. City folks bought extra eggs when prices dropped in spring, preserving them for expensive winter months. The eggs looked and tasted normal, though whites didn't whip quite as high. Small sacrifice for year-round eggs at spring prices. Cornstarch magic. Yes, cornstarch was available during wartime and thank goodness, it was the miracle ingredient of thrifty kitchens. Beyond thickening gravy, cornstarch worked wonders. Mixed with cold water, it cleaned windows without streaking. Sprinkled in shoes, it absorbed odor and moisture. My grandmother made Play-Doh from cornstarch and salt. She'd dust it on playing cards to make them slide smoothly. Cornstarch paste soothed sunburns and diaper rash. She even used it as dry shampoo, brushing it through her hair when water was scarce. One box served a dozen purposes, lasted months, and cost pennies. Modern products just complicate what cornstarch did simply. Matchbox gardens. During the war, victory gardens were patriotic duty, but apartment dwellers got creative with matchbox gardens. Literally, gardens started in matchboxes. My great-aunt lived in a third-floor walk-up with one sunny window. She started seeds in empty matchboxes filled with cotton and a sprinkle of soil. Lettuce, herbs, even tomatoes began life in those tiny boxes. Once sprouted, they moved to tin cans with drainage holes punched in the bottom. By summer, her fire escape looked like a jungle, producing enough tomatoes for sauce and salads. She'd trade vegetables with neighbors, creating a vertical farmer's market. Those matchbox starts cost nothing, but produced food worth dollars. Paper bag magic. Before plastic bags, paper bags were valuable commodities, carefully saved and reused until they fell apart. But they did more than carry groceries. My grandmother assigned each paper bag a destiny. Clean ones stored potatoes and onions. The paper breathed, preventing rot. Waxed bags from cereal boxes became sandwich wrappers. She'd cut bags into sheets for draining fried foods, wrapping gifts, or making patterns for sewing. Twisted into tight rolls, they became fire starters. She even made a lampshade from carefully cut and glued bag paper during the war when replacements weren't available. One bag served 5 or 6 purposes before finally feeding the compost. Gelatin economy. Resourceful housewives used gelatin to extend their household butter rations, but gelatin's thrift went far beyond butter stretching. My grandmother bought unflavored gelatin by the box, using it for everything. Weak gelatin water set her pin curls better than any hairspray. A packet in the laundry made clothes crisp without starch. She'd make poor man's jam from fruit juice, sugar, and gelatin when fresh fruit was expensive. Gelatin clarified cloudy broth, thickened thin gravies, and even waterproofed matches when they were dipped in warm gelatin solution. During the Depression, when a box of gelatin cost less than a nickel, but did the work of products costing dollars, it was kitchen gold. Coal stove efficiency. Not everyone had gas or electric stoves. Coal stove cooking required skill, timing, and clever heat management that saved fuel and money. My grandmother's cousin Martha cooked on coal until 1955. She'd start the day's fire with newspaper and kindling, adding coal gradually. Here's the genius. She cooked in order of decreasing heat needs. Bread in the hot morning oven, roast for lunch as it cooled, slow simmered soup on the dying afternoon coals, the warming shelf above dried herbs and apple rings. She'd bank the coals at night, covering them with ashes to hold heat for morning. One scuttle of coal cooked 3 meals and heated dishwater. Modern cooks use 3 times the energy for half the results.